You don't hear it. I mean, well, ladies and gentlemen, let's get started for the evening. We are live streaming on YouTube, so thank you to our viewers on YouTube, and we are accepting questions as well from our viewers on the live stream. So I'll get to those as often as I can throughout the evening. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Bill Kelvey, and my wife Elaine and I are your proprietors, Gcth Coffee and Wine Bistro and Gcth Gift and Gallery next door. We're happy to see all of you, and we're especially happy to see Mr. Dahlquist, Mark Dahlquist here. Mark is running for the office of the mayor of the city of Pocatello, and he is one in a series of candidate town hall forums that we're having here over the next 3 weeks. So we started off on Tuesday with Kevin Lewis, who is running for a city council seat, and Mr. Dahlquist is here to talk to us about his vision for Pocatello, his plans to get there, and maybe some of his policy positions and platform positions, and to take your questions. So I've received some of your questions. I'll grab a few more of them as we go along, and it should be a pretty educational and informative evening. On a side note, and I will say this every time that we have a town hall, Gcth Coffee and Wine Bistro does not endorse candidates. We are Switzerland. Everybody on the planet comes in here, and all walks of life, all faiths, everything. We embrace everybody that comes in our door. Why? We like making a living. So, to be honest with you, and we are about our community, and we've created a place here in Pocatello that we think is doing a pretty good job of being kind of a home base for community. And so we welcome everybody that walks in the door. So we don't endorse any candidate. We're going to treat them all the same. We're going to ask them a lot of the same questions. Very candidly, with all the candidates, when we began this process, and I sent Mark an email as well as all the other candidates, and I said very specifically, the customers that come in here, and I know a lot of people, and you guys know that. The general consensus from everybody is that they want to know what the candidate platform positions are. They want to know what you stand for, and they want to know your vision for Pocatello, and they want to know your plan on how to get there. Because we have a lot of candidates that are saying the same thing, that we all have a vision for Pocatello. But and we all, you know, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on. We want the best city in the country to live in, and this is our home. And so, how do we make it a better home? And so, we're asking the candidates to tell us their thoughts and what they can do in their capacity in the office that they're running for, on how to get there. So that's why we're here tonight. I'll be asking questions as we go, and I think that we'll probably be able to get a lot of firm answers as we go along. So why don't we get started? We're going to sit, mainly because we're tired. So I've got a few of the questions, and some of these questions are going to be a little bit similar as we go. But I think we'll be able to weed through them pretty quickly. Mark, I guess let's start with this question, and I like this one. This is a good question. What is your plan to bring Pocatello more into the 21st century? Better jobs equal more money for community members equals more spending ability, and the cycle continues. Young people do not want to settle here.
Okay, and I wanted to do an introduction, but we could wait and just dive right into that question if you'd like.
See, I got going right along, and I didn't even do that. So let's start with that. Then I'll repeat the question. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to Mr. Mark Dahlquist. We're glad to have him here this evening. I promised him some time at the beginning of this, and I just went right by that. Mark is going to give us a little bit of an introduction about himself and talk to us a little bit, and then he'll turn it back over. Then I'll start asking some questions.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. And no problem if we have to go off script a little bit. But in my life, there's just like you go into reverse and neutral and drive, and we could do that. But we could start with an introduction. That I think that's appropriate. But first of all, Bill, thank you very much for the invite. Um, this business in historic downtown Pocatello, it's exactly what we want to see. You took a historic building. It's a thriving business. We have meetings over here all the time by board members and different functions. So thank you for the blood, sweat, and tears. I know being a small business owner is tough but rewarding. So thank you. But as Bill said, my name is Mark Dahlquist, running for Pocatello mayor. I'm one of 7 candidates this time around. So lucky for the community, there's a lot of choices out there. And there's some stiff competition, but I do think as we go along that I can differentiate myself, and I think I'm a uniquely qualified candidate. Starting very early on, I was born and raised in Pocatello. I'm one of 6 children, large household, 6 kids that my parents had. One of the really early memories that I have is that we used to travel a lot as a family. It was kind of like the Brady Bunch. We had the station wagon and we would load up and the 6 kids. My mom and dad weren't afraid to take us to anywhere like Mount Rushmore. We drove to Wisconsin. We went to Wyoming, where my parents are from. And I always still remember very crisply that in my mind coming back into town on the interstate going north, just before you get to the Clark Street exit, you get to the crest of that hill there. And before we got to that crest of that hill, I always remember my sisters leading us in a song that was Pocatello, here we come, right back where we started from. So I always had like a tremendous amount of pride for the city. And we would get to the top of that hill and you'd see this beautiful valley, this beautiful city with mountains on 3 sides. Then my dad, that in his career at Idaho State University, he was an administrator at the VOTEC, which is now the College of Technology. And my dad would help recruit new businesses to town. The big feather in his cap was he helped recruit AMI to the community. And how he did that, what his role was, is that the VOTEC school had different trades there. They had electronics, and welding and different programs there. And he took several trips to Santa Clara and other places and talked up ISU and talked up the VOTEC school. And that did happen. And my dad said that, at the very end, that it was just Al Ricken and I that were making these recruiting trips. But the difference is my dad didn't have a road named after him, but he was still there. And I remember asking Dad that, you've been to a lot of places around, Dad, that what's your favorite cities? Where's your favorite place to go? And he would rattle off 2 or 3 different places, but he would say at the end, it's always great to get back to Pocatello, though. There's no better place to live than in Pocatello. So those early kind of memories or impressions, they've always stuck with me. So I've had the deep love, the soft spot for Pocatello. I went to school here. I'm a graduate of Highland High School. I received a bachelor's degree from Idaho State University in management. My first, I guess kind of going before that, my first sort of job was at a place called Rack's Roast Beef. And you may remember that. It's where there's the little Chinese restaurant out in front of the mall now, the Panda Express, so it used to be there. And I worked with a lot of different diverse people there as I went through college that, got to solve problems, and I became an assistant manager there. And that was my first exposure to management way back when I was 20, 21 years old, trying to go to school at the same time. From there, it evolved into Farmers Insurance, was the first job I got after the college graduation in 1988. I worked there for 17 years. I started out as an underwriter, and then progressively I moved into new roles there. Most of the time spent in management. I went through the manager trainee program, and then my last 5 years at Farmers Insurance, that I was asked to start up a customer service center, and that had 50 employees and 3 supervisors. And so I managed that, built it from the ground up, and I actually got the Management Excellence Award one of those years while working at Farmers. So after Farmers, and I'm sorry if I'm going on too long, Bill, but after Farmers, I was fully vested there at the time before I quit. Had a good solid career. I was in management, and I saw the opening come up for an executive director at Pocatello Neighborhood Housing Services, which is now NeighborWorks Pocatello. A lot of conflict there that, 18 years fully vested. I had a retirement. I had a good job. That what should I do? What should I do? But my love for Pocatello and seeing what NeighborWorks Pocatello does for the community, I knew that they tore down old houses and built new ones. I knew they had neighborhood associations. I knew they had a lot of initiatives that involved, they're bringing back pride to our older neighborhoods. And so I applied for that, and luckily I was accepted. The board of directors hired me in 2007. And so the last 18, almost 19 years there, I've been the CEO of NeighborWorks Pocatello. We're a $12 million asset company. We've had many developments. We've built over 200 single family homes. We've rehabbed hundreds of more. Well, what I'm getting at there is that to step into City Hall, it's a complicated place. You have 600 people you have to manage. I think it's even more than that when you add in the seasonal employees. But I have been through budgets. I have been through audits. I know how to read financials. I have personnel management experience. I've had to hire, I've had to fire people, I've had to train people. I've had to start new departments and solve conflicts. So between Farmers Insurance and NeighborWorks Pocatello, that's about 30 years worth of management experience with budgeting, with making board members happy. And so stepping into City Hall is going to be a tough thing, that you've got lots of employees there to manage. You have issues, problems. I've been around the block. I am not stepping into this cold. So it's probably longer winded than you wanted.
No, not at all. We want to know the candidate. And it is absolutely the bottom line. It just reminds me of the old Pocatello dirt myth. Have you heard that? If you leave Pocatello and you don't put a little Pocatello dirt in your shoe before you go, you end up coming back.
Oh,
you heard that one? Yeah. Yes. So, and a lot of people know this. I was in Pocatello when I was a kid. My dad went to ISU. My dad actually worked at AMI, went through the electronics program in the VOTEC, and worked at AMI while he was in college. And so I was here when I was young, and came back after 40 years. And so I have a lot of fond memories myself of Pocatello, so I know exactly what you mean. All right, let's get to some questions, and I'll repeat this first one. What is your plan to bring Pocatello more into the 21st century? Better jobs equals more money for community members, equals more spending ability, and the cycle continues. Young people do not want to settle here. And I'll interject that is a very, very common theme that I hear.
Yeah, sure. But, I think just to start out with, that when I started this campaign, I came out with 3 campaign pillars, if you will. The first one is adding housing supply, having more attainable housing in the community. I go around and I hear that over and over again, that I want to buy a home, I'm stuck, or I'm paying over half my salary in rent. I can't afford to live here. And so platform number 1, and there's 3 of them, I can talk about them briefly, but bringing good housing stock to the community and having options. That if we're spending a massive amount of our disposable, to where we don't have disposable income, we're making very high house payments, that's a problem. With the development at NeighborWorks Pocatello, I think we've made a dent in that. We haven't solved the entire problem, but I get the housing industry. I understand development. I understand funding sources out there. So kind of pillar number one for our young people to stay here, they need a house. And I think you'll all agree that once the 25-year-old gets a new home, there's probably a really good chance that they're going to stay here and plant roots. So I think housing is the bedrock of our success. Second pillar is making Pocatello shine and compete. I'm on a nonprofit called Valley Partners, and several of you may know Arlo Luke. He started up Varsity Contractors in Pocatello. He was on this group. It was called a no-name group that, you know, some executives got together once a week and had phone conferences. And Jim Rogers, the guy that used to own Channel 6, started these no-name group. They just called themselves the no-name group. And I remember Arlo's story very distinctly, that he said he was asked to drive new prospective business people around Pocatello and just show off the community. And he said, you know, Jim, I love Pocatello. I've been here forever, but to be honest with you, I'm embarrassed to drive people around town. And so Arlo started up the Valley Partners, which I'm a charter board member of. And it was started for that very purpose of improving the look and the feel of Pocatello. We started out with city entrances. We did those berms along Highway 30. There's some landscaping on what we call the Alameda Hill, which is between the Pocatello Creek interchange and the Sizzler. Brooklyn's playground, river cleanups, et cetera, et cetera. So that making Pocatello shine and compete, that, you know, we're in an era right now where a lot of people, they can work kind of anywhere they want with all the virtual technology, that there's a lot of people with pretty deep pockets that can work in any community. Or if we're trying to recruit that business of any size, that let's have good amenities, let's have a good trail system, let's have a good river, let's have blocks and main corridors that we drive down that we're proud of. Kind of like when I'm buying a home, I make up my mind in the first minute or two, and a lot of that is curb appeal and how much I like the home. Is curb appeal everything with economic development? No, it's not, but it's a big piece of the puzzle. But amenities, good shopping, good recreation, we got to have that to attract businesses. We have to have, the bottom line needs to count too, with low taxes and everything else. And then the third thing is creating an open book city hall focused on fiscal responsibility and local control. I've been knocking on a lot of doors lately, and you go out there and people are feeling like I'm not listened to, that these decisions are being made in back rooms. I'm hearing all of these issues with our city financials. What's going on? We need an open book. We need to understand all those. So I think, I know I have a plan. You know, I'm not, everybody is going to kind of say we want economic development, but housing, making Pocatello shine and compete, and creating an open book city hall with fiscal responsibility will get us thriving in the 21st century.
Thank you. Let me follow up on that just a little bit here, Mark, because I'm a downtown business person, and I have a very vested interest in the business and the economics of Pocatello. And the question that I get all the time is, how are we going to bring new businesses to Pocatello? And you've talked a little bit about that. We have, on the county level, we have a county function that has been, for all intents and purposes, many people would say, very ineffective for the last 35 years. We just got the news that we're losing the fab plant up at AMI, and that they're selling that. And so, somebody made the comment to me not too long ago that if I want to go buy a suit, I have to drive to Idaho Falls, I have to drive to Salt Lake, I have to go somewhere else. Everybody's super excited because we're finally getting a target, and you might be able to buy a pair of slacks. We seem to be missing a lot of the basic components that a city our size is expected to have. What are we going to do about that? How are we going to recruit businesses that pay decently, that will employ more people in Pocatello, which will, again, back to the question that was just asked, free up some discretionary income and allow people to stay home and shop?
Sure. Well, leaning on my, CEO experience at NeighborWorks, when I took over that organization in 2007, it was floundering. And Richard Stallings ran a very good organization, but there were two executive directors that turned over in a short period of time. And so, knowing what I now know and walking into that, I might have had second thoughts, but I got in there, and within the first month of me being hired, we were audited by NeighborWorks America. We're chartered by them. It's very important. We're one of only two chartered NeighborWorks organizations in Idaho. If you lose their charter, it's a big deal. You probably close your doors. And so we had an audit a month after I started. There were all sorts of problems. We had audit findings. We had about $20,000 in the bank. I wasn't sure how I was going to make payroll. We had a property that we owned in Idaho Falls that got developed that was in trouble for letting people that didn't meet income criteria in there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so that big audit happened by NeighborWorks America. At the time of the audit, we were rated as a strong organization. We had the audit and we went down to vulnerable. And so that was tough stuff there. And so within 5 years, we went from vulnerable to satisfactory to strong to exemplary, and we've been exemplary, and we've stayed that way for the last 8 years or something like that. So the city feels the same. It feels like a little bit in disarray right now. We took some steps that I would do similar to the city. That number one, we did not have financial statements that we understood, that were very reasonable, that were in order. They were skipped. We mistreated the board of directors, wasn't getting their financials. And I felt like step number one was getting a handlehold on our financials so we could make good, solid, informed decisions. Second thing is that I remember going to a convening at NeighborWorks in Washington, D.C., feeling really down, and there was a speaker there, and she said that to kind of like uplift yourself, find one or two things that you do really well and nurture and grow those. And what we did is, I knew that at NeighborWorks we did housing really well, and we started building more of these little infill houses, and we started making money on them. We had lending. We have lending products. All of a sudden we applied for monies from the Treasury Department and got them into Pocatello to deploy for new homeownership and fix-ups. So that's NeighborWorks, and I'm making the connection there, is that Pocatello has some things that it's strong at, that has good potential. One of them is recreation, that we're blessed right in our backyard to have these mountains and rolling hills and mountain biking and trail walking, and we've got the river. That corridor is improving. It needs more work there. But right where we're sitting, we are in a national historic district. I think we need some signage up on the freeway or to tout Pocatello as a national historic district. So item number one, I think we're really good at is recreation, and we have potential. I'm not saying we have great amenities, but I think growing our recreation and our tourism is one way out of this. That we need a hotel down in historic downtown. We're a community of almost 60,000 people with a good up and coming downtown, and we don't even have a hotel here. And I've had guests come in, visitors from out of town, at NeighborWorks, and they're at, well, where do I stay? You know, it's just so there's not really any options other than a couple of Airbnbs down here. So that's a strength. I think recreation, history, tourism, we got that over Idaho Falls. We need to grow that industry. Second thing is that obviously, like being like the two interstate highways that junction here, a railroad, a main line that goes all the way from Chicago to Portland or whatever that is, and another one going north to south, that we have tremendous potential as a hub for distribution centers and transportation. And I visited with the director of the airport, Alan Evans, a couple of weeks ago. There's a lot of good, flat, usable property out there. So I think of transportation and distribution, that I think those are two things that we can really grow and do very well. So going back to that lesson with NeighborWorks, figure out what you're good at or what you have potential with, and grow that versus throwing everything out there and trying everything. Focus the efforts.
Well said. You know, one of the reasons that we call this Gate City Coffee is we took the Pocatello nickname, and most people understand that Gate City, Pocatello is called Gate City because of the hub, the railroad. You know, it's today, most people don't realize that. You touched on tourism. Most people don't realize how many international tourists we have in Pocatello. And it's because they're all going to Yellowstone. They all get that late direct flight into Salt Lake. And the travel agents in Europe are telling them, get your car, drive to Pocatello, stay the night. You beat the traffic, and it's less expensive to stay in Pocatello. For us, they Google coffee and they end up right downtown. And so we, you know, I had a whole van full of French tourists today. We get them from all over Europe, New Zealand, Australia, you name it. And I tell that to people, and it surprises people. But we have a tremendous number of tourists that we can capture. And so when you talk about tourism in Pocatello, that is absolutely a vital thing that does need to be looked at. So
yeah, and what is it like? I forget the exact number, but like 15 million vehicles go along I-15.
Some tremendous amount.
Pull in 0.1% of them, and they're thriving.
Yeah, absolutely. In today's world, a lot of people think Gate City is because we're 2 hours from anywhere. And, you know, 2 hours Yellowstone, Jackson, Sun Valley, Salt Lake, and all the recreation in between. So
yeah, and I was talking to the lady here in the front before we got here, that, you know, she brought up Moab, Utah, that there used to be some big industry in Moab, probably mining and such, that and they pulled out, and the community people were a little bit apprehensive when the tourism came up, but look what a tourism mecca that is, that we have great potential here.
Yeah, you touched on the transportation and the hub. And a question that I would postulate here is, as we move down the road with Pocatello and we start to develop it, do you see the opportunity, and I think you do, to take Pocatello and really brand it in that way? And the reason I guess I would ask you this: we missed our opportunity with Amazon, and everybody knows that we missed it, and it was stupid that we missed it. And Amazon went to Idaho Falls, and there's a lot of people say that, you know, we never really had the shot, but a lot of people believe that we did. And distribution points, transportation hubs, things like that, those are really, really good jobs for the community. How would you go about executing a plan to bring some of those businesses here?
Yeah, and I had heard that Amazon story through the grapevine a week or two. I you know, I don't know all the specifics of that, but I had been hearing that. You know, I think drawing on some expertise from NeighborWorks again, and the philosophy I have, that we built the Park Meadows Senior Apartments out on South Fifth, and Those are 49 units there. We're doing 24 more, so it's going to be 74 new units out there. In applying for that funding for that project, they're called LIHTC funds, low income housing tax credit funds. And to get those, it's a good private public partnership. You work with a for-profit developer to get those done, and a place like NeighborWorks being the sponsor. So that's a competitive process to get these LIHTC funds. And so we found a partner up in Montana to apply with us. We applied for the first year, didn't get it. Applied the second year, didn't get the award. Applied for the third year, finally got the award, and then the Montana partners backed out. So talk about a mad scramble. I had to call Idaho Housing. I made many calls, many visits, and finally found an investor out of Salt Lake that would partner with us. And that ended up being an $11 million development with the $6 million phase two. And I guess what I'm kind of getting at is what I would bring to the city is persistence, persistence, persistence. I'm a detail guy. Developments in the nonprofit world, sometimes you have 6 different funding sources and you have to put them together, and many times you feel like throwing your arms up. You want to give up. So that character trait that I have, that I'm a detail guy and I'm persistent, I have relationships, I'm easy to get along with, I establish trust fast on it. So I think number one is that persistence, and just sticking with it and asking a lot of questions. And if option A doesn't work, go to option B. So I would take that same approach to the city. And then I also, one of the things I will do when I first get in is do some surveying of these places where the deal wasn't closed and find out why. You never really hear that. I don't know if that follow-up's happening.
And I would agree with that. There's seems to be a lot of projects that have been talked about and then dropped, and you don't really hear why they didn't happen.
Yeah.
I've got another question here. What are your plans for police reform, if any? How will you execute these ideas, and how do you foresee, do you foresee any difficulty in performing these tasks?
Yeah, well, the Perez issue is on a lot of people's minds. And, to start off with that, we did not have the quick response from the top when all that unfolded. I can't wait for that question to see you kind of giggling on that one. But that response was very slow, to kind of like paint the picture that I think the response needed to be very quick, within 24 hours. I would have been out there saying I'm the top guy, I take the heat for this, the buck stops here type of guy. That's the type of leader I would be. I would be right there with a big catastrophe like that. But as far as reform, yes, it's needed. That when I go out, I universally hear that we've lost some trust with the police force. However, I know a lot of those guys, and they're great guys, and I have high respect for first responders. My brother was chief deputy officer for Bannock County before he retired. There's some good guys there, but I hope also that the 4 police officers involved are getting some counseling and getting, that's very hard on them. But to answer that question, that yes, reform is needed. And I think one of the keys there is that that's not going to be all done internally. At NeighborWorks, for example, we have resident associations. We're a collaboration of government, private business, and residents. That's right in our mission statement. That's in my DNA. And so you've got to get residents and even business people involved in those reforms. We're not going to do that the door closed without that public involvement. I want to hear more about what people on the street or live here are saying. So reform with lots of public involvement and not done all internally.
You've alluded to the backdoor deals, the backdoor government dealings. And there are a number of people in our community who have highlighted that lately. Pocatello for Accountability has been one of them. Um, there's, and really in follow up to this question with the police reform or potential for police reform, there's a lot of mistrust of our local city government. A lot of people just really feel like they're not being told what's going on, how it's being done. We've had several incidences, the Victor Perez situation, the Northgate project, the infrastructure project south of town. We've had a lot of things happening in Pocatello that people just kind of throwing up their arms saying, that's city government. And a lot of people are connecting, really the best way to say it is the good old boy club to this next generation of citizens that we have in this town, and really saying we really need a change in leadership, and that's of course why you're running. What I guess what I would ask you is this: will you commit to running an open and transparent office if elected? And what would you do to really ensure that the population of our city is able to understand what the process is and what's going on in city government and how they can be involved and help, with their input?
Yeah, yeah, that, first of all, absolutely on the transparency. It's a pretty broad question, but in one regard with our financials that I, I was looking at the city council agenda, a recent one, and I saw on the treasurer's report that that's part of the consent agenda. And of course, if you don't know what the consent agenda is, that's where you have notes or you have a report, and you can view those reports, but a vote is taken and you're approving the consent agenda. You're approving the financial treasurer's report without dialogue. So one piece of that, a lot just goes back to financials. That I remember when we had the CFO Dave Swindell here, that he was very good at all the council meetings, that taking like 10 minutes at the start of the meeting, and he had a dashboard, he had a great PowerPoint presentation, and he articulated very well what was going on financially with the city. And we have to not have the tendency to set a budget and then just put it away and it goes for the next 12 months. That my experience with budgets in my CEO position is that, year to date, you look at those and keep up with what's going on. So it is a broad question, but, one other thing regarding transparency, at least one other thing, is that I had a meeting down here a week or two ago that the city put on, Jennifer Flynn and that department there. And there were some historic downtown business owners there, and just getting them together to talk about all of the problems. And you could probably relate to this, Bill, but there was a lot of, I want to fix up my building, I want to renovate, but I do this and there's surprises, and I think I'm going into it, and then all of a sudden someone tells me I need sprinklers, and I don't even have people living in the place, and there's surprise after surprise, and I'm doing my pro forma financials, and I think that this is maybe going to pencil out, and then this evolves into this big nightmare. And the takeaway that I had there was that, we really need to have the planning department, the building department, the fire inspector, having regular meetings, for example, with business owners that are down here, that there's tremendous potential, again, like using the assets and the strengths that we have, that, the upper level housing you can do here that we have, like above NeighborWorks, we never have problems filling those. I think we have a big void in downtown, but part of that transparency is, I guess, make it predictable. And maybe some of these developers that are like, we're close to the deal and they pull out, gee, I wonder if some of that is I started out interested here, but I didn't really know this and this came up. So I think part of that transparency is education and not, the predictability that's needed. So that and the financials are two big things on my mind.
And I can attest to the predictability issue. That is a problem that we all face, really citywide, but downtown for sure when it comes to buildings and what we're doing. I see that a lot, and it's not uncommon that, unfortunately, and what I hear a lot of is that, and you talk about the building owner that says it pencils out, but I'm afraid that this is coming or that's coming or whatever. And what I seem to hear a lot of is that, especially at the city level, that the business owner, the property owner, will go to the department and say, okay, I want to do this, this, and this. And they'll get their answers, and they'll go back and they'll do their plan and their site plan and everything. Then they'll go back and then they'll get a different set of answers, and it's not predictable. And so that seems to be a problem. I have a question here from Mr. Marvin McCall. He's a retired teacher at Highland High School. He says that you own a U.S. history paper.
Yes.
So, yes. And so, anyway, I thought that was pretty good. Another question, and I like this question. Did you have an obstacle in either your private or professional life that you overcame? What did it teach you, and how do you plan to incorporate this lesson in public service?
Yeah, I've had many obstacles that just, kind of thinking that through that, I think like when early on at NeighborWorks Pocatello with that story that, when we had the audit, we had 2 or 3 audit findings. It was very difficult to get past that I think part of how we got that taken care of is that I'm a believer and I'm okay with hiring someone smarter than me because there's much of that out there. But I hired a good, sharp accounting person that went on to get her CPA and become the CFO. So that was one, I guess, like the big financial obstacle, really filling that out in the development. And I just kind of go back to that lesson in 2007, 2008, that gives me the confidence, like with the city, like, okay, I've had major issues before, I can persevere through this again. Sorry, that's kind of a repeat story, but it's just one that I really go back to.
Well, it's obviously important to you, so that is something that matters. Let me go back to business for a minute. A lot of people are asking a pretty simple question. They want to know, is it jobs or is it housing? Is it jobs that's going to make Pocatello productive? Is it housing?
Yeah.
Is it, we talk about economic development in Pocatello. Do we build more houses? Does that make it better?
Yeah, they're intertwined, and housing isn't the whole answer, but we were talking early on about these people staying here and growing here and planting roots, that we're losing a lot of talent out of the community, that a lot of my friends have moved to the western side of the state, and it makes me mad and sad every time I hear that. So housing and economic development are very related. Is it the end all to fix that? No. It's just the other issues that I was talking about, that a good, clean looking community with amenities, with shopping, a place where you can buy a suit, a well-maintained trail, a well-maintained downtown, that's part of it. So there's some connections there, but no, I'm not going into this thinking that we just do all the housing and we're gonna pull out of it. So somewhat, but no, not completely.
I often make the statement that this is what I'm told, and when you have as many customers as we do here, we hear everything, and this is very, very common. One of the things that, and one of the online questions actually and I'll paraphrase, our student base is fairly strong. And ISU is slowly but surely becoming more solidified as a real gem. I mean, it's been a Pocatello gem for a long time, but people are really starting to recognize the university for what it has to offer. We have a lot of great programs. Unfortunately, everybody leaves. You know, they graduate, they get the degree, and Pocatello doesn't have the job, and they leave. And is there a plan in your mind that, you know, what can we do to help retain our young people here? And is, you know, are the young people that are leaving the people that we should really be focused on?
Yeah, well, I think a big focus should be on the young people that are leaving. Sure, it's a brain drain for all that to happen. So it's connected with that economic development. You know, there has to be good, well-paying jobs. Luckily, I got a decent paying job right out of college at Farmers Insurance as an underwriter. But going back to housing again, if I've got you know, good solid bones there in a house, I tend to stay put and not move along. So economic development is going to fix a lot of that, as well as focusing on our recreation. A lot of young people like the recreation and the vibe. They want a nice, vibrant downtown. It's getting more and more there. We have work to do. That I feel that appeals to me. I think it appeals to young people too. And maybe going back to ISU a little bit, that we do, and my dad, you know, kind of being that recruiter, that the College of Technology, they have a lot of those skilled professions that they, you know, they of course have the electronics and the welding, and I think you can get your LPN from there, etc. One of my first visits would be to ISU and to President Wagner and the head of the College of Technology, especially, that I don't know if the jobs that are the trades that are offered there always match what we need here. At NeighborWorks, we do a lot of construction developments, and I always have a tough time finding contractors. It's, you know, concrete people, plumbers, electricians, the really skilled ones, especially. That growing our economy, we have to have those good trained people, and we've kind of scrimped and struggled for that. And I was talking about that Montana place with our apartment complex out there. The reason why they pulled out was that they could not find enough skilled tradespeople here for the construction. So the Salt Lake place came, and they ended up bringing some of their subs from northern Utah up here. But just kind of that connection with ISU, I think we need to do a better job and work with them and have professionals go there and say, hey, why'd you take the construction program away? We need more of that skilled labor.
So work with the College of Technology specifically to expand the program base a little bit.
Yeah, I was part of that.
Yeah. Back to housing, we've got a question here. It says, you've campaigned pretty hard on affordable housing. And I've really got two questions here that kind of go to the same thing. Could you elaborate on how you plan to make that a reality for the people of Pocatello and what you plan to do that?
Yeah, you know, I think number one, something that's way up there is that with the city and having good rapid approval and a good structured system that everyone understands, that the development is always a lot more friendly if he's talking about it being predictable, and also having the right codes in place. When we put that Bonneville Commons development together, there's 26 houses down there. We weren't able to lay those houses out and do that subdivision the way we wanted to do it. We had good plans that were attractive, well laid out there. But the current code at the time, we would have had to do long, skinny lots all along 8th and 9th there. And we didn't want that for the neighborhood. We didn't want these tall, skinny houses everywhere. And so we did a little bit of research, and we looked at the city's comprehensive plan. And in that long-term comprehensive plan, there was a lot of items that called for be friendly with infill development. And infill means filling in an existing neighborhood, if you don't know that term. But the codes, the actual building codes did not say that. They still had setbacks that were very very wide between houses. The front setbacks weren't matching what was in the rest of the neighborhood. There were some minimum lot size issues. And so we went to the city and we said that, your comprehensive plan says that you should tweak your zoning codes, and you haven't done that yet. So it kind of slowed the project down, but we did go and we were successful and we got those changed. And now there's more friendly development codes for the center of the city. So, I think like having the right building codes, having good communication, I think we need a one-stop shop at the city, because it is that, you go to engineering and they kind of say one thing and planning says other, and that's not a knock against city employees, because I think we have tremendous potential. I think we have great city employees, but we gotta all be on the same page. So those couple of things would help. I don't know if I completely answered that. If I didn't, I can keep going.
No, I think you did pretty well there. The one-stop shop is something that seems to be very appealing to a lot of people in Pocatello. That would help simplify the process.
Sure.
You alluded to the master plan. The master plan was written a few years ago for Pocatello. I'm assuming you've read through it and had a
yeah. I admit I haven't read through the whole thing,
well, sure,
but just parts of it.
Yeah. There's a lot to the master plan. A lot of people really like it, myself included. One of the things that it calls for is for the new park, the surrounding blocks to be town square. And we'll leave this for another time, but there's a lot of talk about moving City Hall, some discussions about that. It was just put out for architectural and engineering bid yesterday to look at the federal building. So there are people that are very interested in making some changes and improving the operations for City Hall and improving the operations for the police department and so on and so forth. With the things that are in the master plan, I guess my question to you is this: do you support the master plan as it's been written, as you understand it, and what steps do you think the city can take? And I think what you just talked about with being willing to tweak a little bit. Do you think the city needs to get a little bit more flexible in how they're doing business to be able to maybe attain this master plan?
Yeah, you have to have a good operating plan too. I think that what I've seen a lot of times is the master plan is out there, and what I've read of it is very good and it's very forward looking, but I think we have a tendency to put those on the shelf, and just hence my example with the infill development. One thing I would do as an executive or as a manager, because you're not a politician when I'm going to be the manager of City Hall, but yeah, there are political things that go with that. But we have had very good success in all of my past jobs with doing annual operating plans, and that's where you take a look at your master plan, and then you carve out for the year what steps you're going to accomplish. And I don't see that happening. And the managers and supervisors that were under me, they had to all once a quarter make a presentation to our board of directors and talk about the accomplishments and talk about what they're doing that's fulfilling that operating plan annually that works into the master plan. But there's just things you see out there that aren't happening. And I read something about the Parks and Rec master plan. I was just reading that last night, and it talks about keeping up on the amenities and maintenance and things like that. But no money has ever been allocated for all of that. But we have restrooms and parks that look like they were built in 1980, we're really good in the porta potty business and a lot of our parks, and just aging structures, that they're aging playground equipment. But I read in that plan that things should be allocated every year to keep up with that. And private business should do that, and our housing development should do that. You're going to have maintenance, and you're going to have to pay for that for years to come. So I like the master plan. The sections that I have seen, I'm worried about the implementation, and I want to fix that.
Mayor Glad has been in office for 16 years. And you'd like to change that, obviously. Tell us a little bit about the concerns that you have with the current administration and the really where you see yourself as a different force for Pocatello, and what you would immediately go in and do differently that the current administration is not doing, or that they're doing that you would do differently. And I know that's a pretty broad question. Yeah. But do you have some thoughts there?
Yeah, Brian and I get along. That he, with NeighborWorks, we work with the city. It's been, I don't have ill will or anything there. That I'm going around a lot. I'm knocking on a lot of doors, and I'm hearing, that the 4 terms is enough. That we seem to be stuck in a rut. These communities all around us are growing in Idaho Falls and Twin Falls, and it's just like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? We need good, fresh ideas. And so I just think that I know I bring a lot of experience to the table, and the 18 years I spent at Farmers Insurance, that's a big company. We had a big regional service center in Pocatello, and I rubbed elbows with executives all the time, and I went to the Los Angeles office, and I got a good pulse for what they wanted. That they, and I bring that to the table. I have corporate business experience that I can bring, and I know about running a profit. Like, even in my job today, I still have to make payroll. I'm not relying on the tax revenue to do that. I've got to work hard. But so I think that business background and being the CEO of NeighborWorks America, I'm also highly involved in the community, and I feel like I have a very good pulse of what's out there and what people are saying. And I've been recognized for those efforts. That I don't like to brag about this, but I'm running for office. But I was the Distinguished Citizen Award winner from the Chamber of Commerce in 2020. I got the Idaho State Journal and the Idaho Nonprofit Center's Outstanding Nonprofit Award in 2018. I was Volunteer of the Year. So I'm not saying that to be braggy. I'm just saying that, like, I know the community really well. I've been on the beautification committee for 30 years. Every first Saturday in May, I'm down at Caldwell Park running that citywide spring cleanup. That NeighborWorks, we have neighborhood associations. We have 6 different big neighborhood associations. I know what they're saying. I know what's on their mind. I know what gripes they have about the city. And the funding for nonprofit housing. I have all that background. I have a different background that I'm shifting to City Hall, and so experience does matter, and I am experienced. And one, a pet peeve of mine is I go back to that making Pocatello shine and compete. We at NeighborWorks have done everything we possibly can to make Pocatello shine and compete. We rehab houses. We have a tool lending library. We're finding that people that needed to mow their lawns or whatever, or take care of their properties, maybe they don't have the working lawn and garden tools. So you can come to NeighborWorks for $5 and get a lawnmower fully filled with gas or whatever to clean that up. But there's a hole with the city that, we will help them out all we can with the rehab or lawn and garden equipment. But the code enforcement in this town is broken. and I'm hearing that so much, and my pulse with neighborhood folks and listening to them. We have a community and government relations committee meeting once a month. They're always mad about code enforcement, and the code enforcement people in there now are fine people. They work really hard, but what they did about 3 or 4 years ago is that they merged parking, code enforcement, and animal enforcement all in one. And it was spun to us that we're going to have all this time, we're going to have extra people with code enforcement. Well, guess what? We get to May and June and they're telling us that we have so many animal complaints that we can't get to that right now. So our taxes are high here. And what we at least need to do is have great return on our investment. And if we're paying high taxes, like, show your work there. I'm not sure. I know we're not. You know, you drive down the road and things just aren't in good shape. But with code enforcement, you know, yes, let's give them warnings. Let's give them the NeighborWorks tools there for a very low cost. But if you ain't going to comply, or you're an out-of-state landlord or whatever else, I think we need to go clean it up for you. Someone will have to clean it up for you, and you're going to foot the bill.
Code enforcement does seem to be a problem.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask you one more question, and I'm gonna let you wrap up with a final statement. I posed this to Kevin Lewis on Tuesday. Pocatello is one of 4 cities in the state of Idaho that really anchor the state. Boise to the west, Coeur d'Alene to the north, Idaho Falls to our due north, and Pocatello. And each of these cities is doing well, except for us. To the degree we're not where they are. What does Pocatello bring to the table to the state? You know, what can we bill ourselves as? What can we do to make, and this really goes to your shine and compete idea, but, you know, to you, what does Pocatello have that it brings to the table that you can say, I live in Southeast Idaho, and this is who we are?
Sure. Yeah. You know, I hear those. I know there's problems to fix, and I hear people say that, and it makes me sad, because I'm a real good cheerleader for Pocatello. And yes, we have problems, but we also have a morale problem here. And it's just like, oh, I'm from Pocatello, we can't do that. Well, bull crap. Yes, we can. And so maybe people have a reason to hold their heads low, but you know, we need to have an attitude when you fix things and make the community better. We all need to join hands. And I know there's 7 candidates running. We don't all stand for the same thing, but once this election is over, I'm going to work with everybody to, you know, to join hands and make the place better. But I just, so kind of to preface that you know, we need an attitude adjustment, and we need to be better cheerleaders for our community. I know that when companies are looking around, they look on social media, and what would you do? You know, if you pulled up some, it feels like we live in a hellhole if you read, you know, go, and we don't, you know, that, yeah, we need growth, we need new jobs, but, you know, a lot of things, you know, to make Pocatello, like Idaho State University is a shining star. They don't have that in Idaho Falls. We are the Eastern Idaho State University, and it is thankfully growing. But the people of Pocatello, that being involved in many of these nonprofits and community groups, that we coined the phrase that Pocatello should really be known as the volunteer capital. That we get calls and ask for assistance like crazy at the NeighborWorks office. Like, people truly do want to roll up their sleeves and help. We have fabulous turnout at the citywide spring cleanup. That I don't know if we're harnessing all of that. That the city can't do everything on its own. Yeah, we have to have that really good investment, but we're not going to really change this place until we all get involved. And I think a volunteer coordinator at the city or something like that. So I would confidently say we have a good sense of community here, and people want to roll up their sleeves and help those in need.
Smile capital of the world, right?
That's right. That's right.
Very good. Mark, I appreciate you being here this evening. I think we've covered the questions we're going to cover for tonight. I'd like to wrap things up with you just, giving us any kind of final statement, any thoughts that you have on your mind. And then after that, Mr. Dahlquist will visit with you all, and maybe you can one-on-one a little bit.
Yeah. I've really met a lot of great people through this. My life has changed in the last 5 weeks for sure. But I'm getting out there and talking to so many great people, and they have great ideas. And I know we're not doing enough to listen to people. If people aren't listened to and they don't think they're heard, that all of a sudden their attitude goes downhill. They lose trust, etc. So I will continue doing that. I have no problems going out there once a month for a town hall or whatever it takes. I'll take the heat, whatever. People sometimes just need to vent, and everybody has their own unique perspective. And at NeighborWorks, also all sorts of socioeconomic levels, that we do a lot of our work in low-income census tract neighborhoods, and those people need a voice, and we do all we can to give them a voice. We teach them skills on going to talk to their elected officials and how city government works, that empowering them so they feel like they have a voice. So that's kind of one item I'll leave you with. But I guess just look at my background and my ability to take on this job. I'm a professional. I haven't job hopped there. I stay at places for a really long time. I'm detail orientated. I create relationships with NeighborWorks Pocatello. We brought a lot of outside money into the community from the Treasury Department, the Federal Home Loan Bank, Wells Fargo Bank. I wrote a grant to pay for all that new playground equipment down at First Park. But I have partnerships. I'm detail orientated. I understand development. I know what the pitfalls are at City Hall and where we could clean that up a bit. But on a personal note, that I could really retire right now and be fine. With my longevity in the jobs that I've had, that especially in a couple of years, I could fully retire. And I don't need a job. I'm not doing this for my resume. I don't care about my resume. I'm later in my career now, and so I've been involved in the community organizations. We're going to turn Pocatello around. I have a deep love and passion for this community. I know how it works. I know what the poll says. I know the people. I ain't doing this because I need a new job. I'm doing it because all these things you talk about Pocatello, it's like I'm your guy. I can't do it by myself, but I am ready for this.
Well, Mark, there is no question that you have a passion for Pocatello, and we certainly appreciate you coming out and speaking to the constituents tonight. And on a personal note, Mark has been coming in here ever since we opened, and I only known Mark to be a very gracious and humble human being, and he has a lot of friends. And so there's no doubt in my mind that he is a Pocatelloan at heart and has the best interest of Pocatello. So we appreciate you very much, and good luck in the race.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. And just a quick commercial. I do raise money for a living with my job, but I have a website. It's markforpocatello.com. follow me on Facebook, Mark Dahlquist, Pocatello Mayor, and running a campaign and getting this word out and all that. It's sort of expensive. So, you know, donations, you can make them through my website, or you can talk to the neighbor works thereafter. So thanks for letting me get in that commercial.
Absolutely. And we'd also like to thank our viewers online for joining us. And the link for tonight's town hall will be stored on there on YouTube and on our Gay City Coffee Facebook page. You can go to that anytime you want to come back and listen to this again, or if you weren't able to hear the whole thing, and that'll be available up until Election Day. So thanks again, Mike.
Okay, thank you, everyone.